Public Nemesis Media.
Welcome to History of Macedonians, an online internet series where you'll learn the past and the formation of the Macedonian nation. I started this YouTube project because I was very dissatisfied with how many people explain the complicated history of Macedonians, including outside of this platform. Because the origins of Macedonians are explained so poorly, a lot of people believe that the Macedonian nation had no history or ethnogenesis, but simply fell from the sky or was invented, which are claims that couldn't be further from the truth. This series will not only explain why the topic about Macedonia is so complicated, but it will also show that the Macedonian nation has its own history, ethnogenesis, and unique national characteristics like every other nation. First things first, in order to understand the origins of the Macedonian nation, we have to take a look on the origins of the name Macedonia. That name is very old, dating as far as back in the 8th century BC. According to an old Greek legend, there was a man named Macedon who founded a tribe named after him, Macedonis, or Macedonians in English. I know I say Macedonia in a weird way. Feel free to laugh at me, I laugh at myself. The name comes from an old Greek word Makedonos, meaning tall. Although we can never be 100% sure, it is believed, as the myth claims, that the Macedonian state was founded in 808 BC in the heart of the Balkan Peninsula, and it bordered the Hellenic, Illyrian, and Thracian people. The first ruler of ancient Macedonia was King Caranus, who was the founder of the Argead dynasty. As for the racial character of the ancient Macedonians, it's a constant debate on whether they were Hellenes or not. Frankly, them being Greeks or non-Greeks is irrelevant in the formation of the modern Macedonian nation. Still, it's interesting to discuss why that debate came into existence. You see, the ancient Macedonians proved their Greekness when Alexander I was allowed to participate in the Olympic Games around 504 BC. Their inscriptions, which were many, were written in a Greek dialect, and numerous Greeks from the ancient times, like Herodotus, Thucydides, Marsyas, and others, have confirmed that the ancient Macedonians were Greeks. However, we have to keep in mind that Greek back then meant being part of a Hellenic tribe. It's not how we use that word today. Back then, there wasn't a single Greek state like modern-day Greece. Instead, we have dozens of city-states with their own government and way of life. Those Hellenic states would get in conflicts with one another, and throwing insults was not uncommon under such conditions. The favorite insult of the ancient Greek people was barbarian. Originally, a barbarian was a person who did not speak Greek, yet by the classical antiquity era, it became a term for anyone who you didn't like. Indeed, some Greeks referred to other Greeks as barbarians, and ancient Macedonia fell victim to that practice. Matter of fact, there was a period of time when they were viewed as the black sheep of the Greek family. Unlike most Greek states, ancient Macedonia did not adopt a democratic system, nor did they move away from old traditions most Greeks viewed as outdated, which made them seem backwards and behind the times.
We know the Macedonians were fundamentally Greeks. That is to say, they were Greek speakers, and ethnically, if there is such a thing, they were Greek. But they were so far out of the mainstream of the development of the Greek polis that we have been examining this semester, that many Greeks, perhaps most of them, didn't think of them as being Greek. You know, when Greeks thought about what it was to be a Greek, they thought about more than the fact that they spoke the Greek language. They thought fundamentally, if you get to Aristotle, you see how thoroughly true this is. It had to do with a culture, a way of life, and that way of life was based upon the independent polis. Well, Macedon did not have such a structure. There were no polis in the Macedonian kingdom. It was something that we might call feudal. That is to say, yes, there was a monarch, but there were powerful noblemen who were practically independent and who owed only a limited allegiance to the king and who were really the dominant figures in the state for most of the history prior to the appearance of Philip. In a certain sense, if a Greek had looked at Macedonian society prior to Philip, he might have described it as Homeric, and you'll be familiar with that. Sure, there were guys called basileis, but they were not really the rulers over the barons, these great noblemen in their kingdom. And they thought of it as uncivilized in the technical sense. If you don't live in a polis, a city as they understood it, then you are not civilized.
With all of that being said, ancient Macedonians have proven that you should never underestimate an underdog. In 359 BC, the kingdom of Macedon got a new king. He's known as Philip II, and his tactics and reformation have turned Macedonia into a very powerful state. With the usage of smart diplomacy, marriage alliances, sieges, as well as the establishment of the Macedonian phalanx, Philip II went south and conquered every Greek state one by one, with the exception of Sparta. This conquest led to the creation of the League of Corinth, also known as the Hellenic League, a federation of Greek states led by the ancient Macedonians. It wasn't just some sort of trophy for Philip II's brilliant leadership, it was a huge moment for the Greeks because this was the first time in history where almost all Greeks were unified under one leadership and into a single political identity. The League of Corinth wasn't created for the sole reason to unify the Greek states. Philip II wanted to bring all Hellenic people together so they could defeat their then nemesis, the Persians. That certainly wasn't an easy task. The Persian, or should I say the Achaemenid Empire, was one of the most powerful states in the world, and let's not forget that Philip II couldn't even get to the point of actually going to war because he was assassinated by one of his bodyguards. Hence the campaign against Persians was taken over by Philip's son Alexander III, more commonly known as Alexander the Great. He came to power in 336 BC, and during his 13-year-long rule, Alexander defeated and conquered the Achaemenid Empire, expanded his territory all the way to India, founded many cities, and spread the Greek culture everywhere he went. Oh, did I mention that he never lost a single battle? I don't think I need to say anything more about a man who's perhaps the greatest military commander in history of mankind. Unfortunately for the Greeks, everything went downhill after Alexander's mysterious death. Firstly, his enormous empire broke into many smaller empires. The people couldn't agree on who should succeed Alexander the Great, so a chaotic power struggle took over. The second event that led to the demise of Macedon was the attack from another superpower that even they couldn't handle. I, of course, am referring to the Roman Empire. In a series of battles today known as the Macedonian Wars, the Romans have defeated not just ancient Macedonians, but all the Hellenic people, and by 168 BC, the Roman Empire conquered the entire Balkan Peninsula. Although the conquest was successful, the Romans still had problems controlling the area of what was Macedon due to rebellions by the ancient Macedonians. So they decided to create a new province in 146 BC that had some autonomy in order to make anti-Roman rebellions stop. Of course, the province was called Macedonia. Afterwards, in 293 CE, Macedonia was divided into 4 smaller provinces: Epirus Nova, Thessalia, Macedonia Prima, and Macedonia Salutaris. Most of the indigenous population in the Balkans was Latinized by the Romans. We can see the results of that process today in the form of Vlachs, Romanians, and Moldovans. The Hellenes did not go through that process because they had a developed culture, and the Romans respected them to the point they didn't even try to Romanize them. That is the reason why, demographics-wise, Macedonia remained the same even under Roman control. However, just like the kingdom disappeared, so would the ancient Macedonians. Firstly, the Eastern Roman Empire was continuously raided by a Germanic people called the Goths, starting in 330, so basically since its foundation. Those raids were massive blows to the ancient Macedonians. Many of them were murdered, enslaved, and taken away, while some escaped to other parts of the empire or fled into the mountains. It was only until 540 when the Eastern Roman, or should I say Byzantine, Emperor Justinian I finally managed to banish the Goths for good. Immediately after that, the Persians decided to attack. Then the plague happened. Then the Avars invaded, and their invasion faced weak resistance due to the previously mentioned things. While the Avars didn't stay, their subjects, the Slavs, rebelled against the Avar rule and remained in the Balkans as free people. The Slavs noticed that the Balkan Peninsula had good deserted fields abandoned due to Gothic and Avar raids, the plague, and the war with the Persians. It also didn't help that Justinian I decided to heavily tax the peasants so he could fund his plan to take the lost Roman territories in the west. Seeing the good living conditions, the Slavs remained in the Balkans, including Macedonia, and even brought their entire families and other Slavs to live with them. As for whatever was left of the ancient Macedonian population, they once again fled to other areas, escaped to the mountains, or were assimilated by the numerous Slavs. The Slavic settlement was pretty much the last nail in the coffin of the ancient Macedonians. By the mid-7th century, they faded into history. The only part of Macedonia that remained Greek was the very well fortified city of Thessaloniki, described by the Greeks from that time as a Roman island in a Slavic sea. The rest of Macedonia became Slavic. Now comes an important question. What is the connection between the ancient Macedonians and the Slavs who later arrived to their lands? Obviously, there is a link, albeit not a strong one, between the old Macedonians and the new Slavic Macedonians. They have the same name, the same land, and there was some mixing between them. With that being said, some people love to falsify history and claim a direct descendance from the ancient Macedonians, claiming how their Slavic ancestors took the Macedonian name from those old Macedonians and called themselves that since the 6th century, how only they were the descendants of the ancient Macedonians, how they were the same people, going as far as to deny that they were Slavs, etc. I believe that no one explained the connection between ancient and modern Macedonians better than Vasily Ivanovsky, a pioneer of Macedonian historiography. His 1943 work, The Macedonian Question in the Past and Today, says the following. The modern-day Macedonian nation, made mainly out of Slavic tribes that came to the Balkans during the 6th century CE and from the remnants of old Illyrian tribes that have disappeared, disposes such ethnic physiognomy in which we cannot discover any traces of the ethnic physiognomy of ancient Macedonians. Neither the character nor the oldest traditions and customs of the modern-day Macedonians show similarities with the character, traditions, and customs of the ancient Macedonians. The only realistic historical connection with those old Macedonians we can see in our common geographical fatherland, in our common and kept to this day historical name of the two Macedonian people, as well as a common participation of the Illyrian element in their composition. To abuse history and historical facts by putting modern-day Macedonians in blood relations with Alexander the Great would not only mean that we are betraying the historical truth, but we would also turn into laughable and despised chauvinists. This episode has been about the origins of the name Macedonia, the ancient Macedonians, and their connection to the modern-day Macedonian nation. In the second episode, we'll focus on the Slavs that settled in Macedonia and their history from the arrival to the Balkans until the national revival. Thank you for watching. PNM signing out.